The night should have been one of celebration. The house was glowing with lights, the air filled with the faint fragrance of roses and incense, and laughter still echoed faintly in the halls. My son's wedding had just ended, and the bride, the new daughter-in-law I had prayed for, was now officially part of our family. I remember sitting in my room that night, tired but happy, replaying the scenes of the wedding in my mind. I thought of my late husband, how he would have smiled to see our son dressed as a groom. I whispered a prayer of gratitude, believing my sacrifices as a mother had finally borne fruit. But that peace shattered in a way I could never have imagined. When I rose to step out of my room, I reached for the doorknob, and it wouldn't turn. Confused, I tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. My brows furrowed. Had it jammed? I rattled the knob, tugged at the door, even knocked gently at first, then louder. The corridor outside was silent, but just when I pressed my ear to the wood, I heard it. Soft footsteps, hushed giggles, and the distinct sound of a key turning in the lock. My heart stopped. Someone had locked me in. I called out, my voice shaky. Hello? Is someone there? Please open the door. But instead of a reply, the laughter grew fainter, drifting away as though mocking my helplessness. I pressed my palm against the door, disbelief flooding me. Who would do this to me on this night of all nights? Shame crept over me, hot and suffocating. What if a guest needed me? What if relatives thought I had chosen to isolate myself instead of joining the new couple in their moment of happiness? Time passed slowly in that suffocating room. The walls seemed to close in as I sat by the locked door, my dignity crumbling with each tick of the clock. A mother-in-law should have been honored on such a night. But instead, I was a prisoner in my own home. At some point, exhaustion overtook me. My tears dried on my cheeks as I leaned against the wall, listening to muffled sounds outside. I could almost hear faint voices, hers, bright and sweet when speaking to others, but edged with something darker when she thought I wasn't listening. By the time the key turned again, it was dawn. The door creaked open as if nothing had happened. I rushed forward, but the hallway was empty. Only the faint scent of jasmine lingered in the air, the perfume of my new daughter-in-law. In that moment, a chill ran through me. This was no accident. It was deliberate, and though I didn't yet know why, a shadow of betrayal had already slipped into my home. Quiet, smiling, and carrying the scent of jasmine. The scent of jasmine still lingered when I stepped out into the hallway that morning. The house, once warm with music and chatter, now carried an unusual stillness. My feet were heavy, my mind restless. I told myself I must have been mistaken, that perhaps the lock had been turned for safety, not malice. A mother should not doubt her new daughter-in-law on the very first night, I reasoned. But even as I tried to bury the unease, I could feel it rising, like a shadow I couldn't shake off. The courtyard was alive with the sounds of mourning. Relatives were gathered, sipping tea and reminiscing about the beautiful ceremony. And there she was, my new daughter-in-law. Dressed in a soft peach-colored dress, her face glowed with the innocence of a newlywed bride. She smiled at me sweetly, her voice soft as honey when she said, "Ami, you must have been so tired last night. I hope you rested well." Her words might have sounded like care to anyone else, but they cut me differently. Tired, rested, how could I explain that I had spent the night locked away, humiliated in silence? My lips pressed into a smile, but inside, suspicion gnawed at me. As the morning went on, I began to notice the little things. The way she leaned in too closely to whisper something into my niece's ear, both of them breaking into hushed giggles while glancing in my direction. The way her eyes lingered on me, not with affection, but with something sharper, almost triumphant. Whenever family members praised me for raising such a good son, she would bow her head modestly, but I caught the smirk tugging at the corners of her lips. A smirk that said she knew something I didn't. Later, when the women gathered in the kitchen, I entered quietly, hoping to join in. But as soon as I stepped inside, their chatter stopped. Only the faintest trace of her laughter remained, echoing in the silence. She turned to me with perfect politeness, her eyes feigning innocence as she asked if I needed tea. I stood there, the weight of isolation pressing on my shoulders. I was no longer the center of my household. I was an outsider in my own home, and then there were the sly comments. Small at first, like thorns hidden in silk. When I suggested what should be cooked for lunch, she laughed lightly and said, "Times have changed, Ami. The old ways are too heavy. Let me handle things now." Everyone chuckled along, not realizing that her words stripped me of authority, making me look outdated and irrelevant. I swallowed the hurt, but inside, something broke. For years I had managed this home. Every corner bore the imprint of my hands. Every meal carried the taste of my love. And now, with a few well-placed whispers, she was unseating me, brick by brick, smile by smile. The most painful part wasn't her behavior. It was the silence of others. My son, my pride, my everything, sat among them, smiling gently, never once noticing the daggers hidden in his wife's words. His silence felt like betrayal itself. By evening, I realized something chilling. The night's locked door wasn't an isolated act. It was the first move in a larger game. A game where I was the obstacle, and she, my new daughter-in-law, was determined to claim her place. Not beside me, but above me. And as I lay in bed that night, my heart heavy, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end of her whispers. It was only the beginning of a storm that would strip away the walls of my dignity, one mocking laugh at a time. The days that followed were a blur of smiles and shadows. Outwardly, our home glowed with the charm of a new bride's arrival. Neighbors visited with gifts, relatives praised her beauty, and my son walked around with pride in his eyes. To them, everything was perfect. But to me, perfection was only a mask. Beneath it, whispers and smirks were quietly poisoning the air. Still, I tried to hold on to patience. I told myself it was just adjustment, that in time, she would soften and respect me as her elder. But that hope crumbled the evening she humiliated me at the family table. It was our first grand dinner after the wedding. The long dining table was lined with relatives and close friends. The aroma of biryani, kebabs, and freshly baked bread filled the air, dishes I had supervised myself, ensuring the feast reflected our family's pride. I wanted the evening to be perfect, for my son, for his new wife, and for the dignity of our household. I entered the dining hall with a tray of dishes, my heart swelling with quiet satisfaction. But before I could even set it down, her voice cut through the chatter. "Ami, why are you carrying this? You should rest. You've done enough already. Times are changing. Let me handle things from now on." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes glittered with something sharp. The guests chuckled approvingly, praising her modern thinking. But to me, her words carried another meaning. "You are no longer needed here." I forced a smile and sat down. But the sting lingered. As dinner began, one of my relatives complimented the biryani. My heart lifted for a moment until she leaned forward and said with a laugh, "Oh, thank you." I told the cook to add a little twist to the recipe. "I guess my ideas work better than the old traditional ones." The table erupted in laughter. I felt my face burn. My recipe, the one I had perfected over years, the one my husband used to say carried the warmth of my soul, was dismissed in a single sentence. Stolen from me and claimed as hers. I looked toward my son, silently begging him to correct her, to acknowledge my role, but he simply smiled at his wife, pride glowing in his eyes, as though she had just won some competition. His silence crushed me more than her words ever could. The humiliation deepened as the evening went on. She recounted little mistakes I had made earlier that day, forgetting where the new plates were kept, suggesting an outfit she found too outdated. Each comment was wrapped in a laugh, as if harmless, but every guest could see the pattern. The bride was smart and capable, and the mother-in-law was old, clumsy, and irrelevant. Every chuckle, every nod of agreement felt like a nail hammered into my dignity. I sat there, my hands folded tightly in my lap, praying no one would notice the tears threatening to escape my eyes. The final blow came when my cousin asked about the family finances. innocently wondering who managed the household accounts now. Before I could speak, she smiled and replied, "Oh, I'll be handling all of that now. It's better for young people to take responsibility. Poor Ami has done it for so long she deserves a break. Poor Ami." The words echoed in my ears, each syllable stripping me of authority, respect, and worth. To the others, it may have sounded kind. But to me, it was the cruelest form of mockery, reducing my years of sacrifice to pity. The table buzzed with admiration for her thoughtfulness, while I sat there invisible, erased from the very home I had built. That night, as I cleared the empty dishes long after everyone had left, my hands trembled. The humiliation burned inside me, not just for what was said, but for what it meant. She wasn't just mocking me. She was taking my place, piece by piece, right before my eyes. And as I placed the last plate back on the shelf, a chilling realization struck me. This wasn't only about control at the dinner table. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous, something that would test the very foundation of our family. The night after that dinner, I lay awake long after everyone had gone to bed. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to rest. Her words replayed again and again. Poor Ami. Outdated ideas? I'll handle everything now. They weren't casual remarks. They were deliberate strokes, each one painting me as weak and irrelevant. But if the dinner was a public humiliation, what I discovered next was a private war. One afternoon, I went to the cupboard in my room where I always kept the household keys. For years, those keys had been my silent crown, symbols of responsibility and trust. They unlocked everything: the storeroom, the jewelry chest, the important papers my late husband left behind. I had never once misplaced them. But that day, when I reached for the familiar jingling bunch, the hook was empty. A chill ran down my spine. I searched every drawer, every corner of the room, but they were gone. My heart pounded as I hurried to the kitchen, then to the storeroom. The locks had been changed, panic set in, followed by a wave of betrayal that almost stole my breath. Who else could have done this, and why? My answer came sooner than I expected. That evening, as I walked past my son's room, I heard the faint clinking of metal. I paused at the door, and through the small gap, I saw her, my daughter-in-law, pulling the bunch of keys from her purse and placing them neatly into a drawer. She closed it with such satisfaction, as though she had just claimed a victory. My knees weakened beneath me. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was theft of authority, a quiet coup carried out under my very roof. From that day onward, everything changed. When groceries were delivered, she signed for them. When relatives came asking for heirlooms, she opened the jewelry chest. When bills arrived, she handled them with a smile, as though it was only natural. My son looked on proudly, blind to the fact that his wife was not helping. She was replacing. And yet, she never once confronted me directly. No, her weapon was subtlety. She would lock certain cupboards and then watch silently as I searched for items I once accessed freely. When guests asked me about family documents, she would appear from nowhere with them already in hand, making me look forgetful, unprepared. Each time she painted herself as capable, while quietly reducing me to nothing more than a bystander in my own home. The cruelest moment came one evening when I wanted to wear my late husband's watch, a piece of him I clung to in moments of despair. I went to the drawer where it had always been, but the lock had been changed. With trembling hands, I asked her about it. She smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, don't worry, Ami. I keep all the valuables safe now. Things are more secure this way." Her tone was gentle, but her eyes told another story. "You have no power here anymore." I wanted to scream, to demand my rights, to tell my son the truth. But every time I looked at him, the joy on his face silenced me. He saw his wife as perfect. If I accused her, would he believe me? Or would he see me as bitter, jealous, unable to accept change? So I swallowed my pain. But inside, something was shifting. I began to watch her more closely. Her sudden phone calls behind closed doors, the way she always asked about my son's work schedule, the way she gathered papers late at night, her eyes darting around as if she feared being caught. It was no longer a battle of household duties. She was building something bigger, brick by brick, in the shadows of our lives. And with every key she claimed, she wasn't just locking doors, she was locking away my dignity, my authority, and everything my husband and I had built together. That night, as I lay in the darkness, I whispered to myself, "This is not mere disrespect. This is war." And though I didn't yet know the full extent of her plan, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. She wasn't finished. The war I feared was no longer silent. With every passing day, the balance of the household tilted further away from me. I tried to convince myself that perhaps I was imagining things, that perhaps the new bride only wished to help. But deep down, I knew. Help does not come with locked cupboards, stolen keys, and sly smiles. Help does not make a mother feel like a stranger in her own home, and soon, the mask she wore began to slip. It started with a phone call. Late one night, as I passed by the sitting room on my way to get water, I heard her voice, sharp, hurried, nothing like the sweet tone she used in front of the family. She spoke in English at first, trying to blur the meaning, but I caught fragments. Words like property, transfer, documents ready, just a little more time. My steps froze. Property transfer? My heart thudded so loudly I feared she might hear it. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath as I listened. Then came the words that broke me. "Once I have control, he'll do whatever I say. He trusts me blindly." I didn't need to wonder who he was. My son, my only child, the boy I had raised with my blood and tears. She was not just winning his love. She was twisting his trust into a weapon against me. I stumbled back to my room, my legs trembling. That night I barely slept, my mind replaying her every word. Over the next few days, I began to notice more. The way she lingered near my son when he worked on his laptop, insisting she help with his accounts. The way she casually asked relatives about the family property, fishing for details with feigned innocence. Even the way she began accompanying him to the bank, always insisting it was easier if she went along. It wasn't just control of the household she wanted. It was control of everything. One afternoon, fate placed undeniable proof in my hands. I had gone into the living room to tidy up after the guests left. On the coffee table lay her phone, screen glowing with an open message. I tried to look away, but my eyes caught the words, and my heart clenched. "Don't worry. Soon the property will be under my name. The old woman is easy to handle. He listens only to me." I stood there frozen, the phone shaking in my hands. The message wasn't meant for family. It was sent to a number saved simply as K, and judging by the tone, it was no friend or relative. My vision blurred with tears. All this time, I had prayed for my son to have a wife who would care for him, who would respect the home we had built together. Instead, we had welcomed a serpent who was coiling herself tighter around his life. The humiliation at the dinner table, the stolen keys, the sly whispers, they were all pieces of a bigger plan. She hadn't married for love. She had married for power, for property, for the very roof over our heads. The realization was like a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. For days, I carried this knowledge alone. Every word she spoke dripping with double meanings, every smile hiding betrayal. My son, blind in his devotion, could not see what I saw, and I feared that if I told him outright, he would accuse me of jealousy, of trying to poison his marriage. But silence weighed heavier than truth. One evening, I found myself lingering outside their room again. The door was slightly ajar and her voice carried clearly. She was on another call. This time, I heard it all. "Yes, the documents are almost ready. I just need his signature. Once that's done, everything will belong to us. Don't worry, I've already pushed his mother aside. She won't interfere. She's weak now." My hand gripped the doorframe to steady myself. Weak? Was that what she thought of me? That I had no fight left? Anger surged through me, stronger than the humiliation, stronger than the pain. I realized then that she had underestimated me. She saw me as a frail woman, blinded by love for her son, too broken to resist. But she was wrong. That night, as I lay in bed, I wiped my tears and whispered into the darkness. She may think I am weak, but she will learn, slowly, painfully, that a mother's silence is not surrender. It is the calm before the storm. The house had grown heavier with each passing day, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down like a storm that refused to break. By now, I had seen enough, heard enough, and endured more than enough. The whispers, the locked doors, the missing keys, the sly control over every corner of the household, each piece of the puzzle pointed to the same chilling truth. My new daughter-in-law was not here for love, nor for family. She was here for power, but what cut deepest of all was not her ambition. It was my son's blindness. The boy I had raised with love and sacrifice, the boy who once clung to my hand, now walked past me as though I were a stranger. His silence at dinners, his averted eyes whenever his wife mocked me, his coldness in moments where once there had been warmth, each small betrayal carved new wounds into my heart. And yet I held my tongue. I waited. That night, however, the silence could no longer be kept. It was late when I heard voices in the courtyard, sharper than usual. My son's laughter, followed by his wife's mocking tone, carried through the open window. I stepped into the hall, and there she was, standing close beside him, whispering in his ear, her hand resting on his arm as if she owned him entirely. And he, my son, my blood, leaned into her words as though they were gospel. Summoning every ounce of strength, I called his name. My voice trembled, but it carried authority, the authority of a mother who would not be ignored. They both turned. Her smile was sly, almost triumphant, while his face was clouded with irritation. "I need to speak to you," I said firmly. She tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Mother, is it really necessary?" "We were just talking." "Now," I interrupted, my eyes fixed on my son. He sighed, already defeated by my insistence. Together, we entered the sitting room. The air was charged, as though the walls themselves braced for what was to come. I closed the door behind us, and for the first time, I let my anger rise. "I know what you've been doing," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "I know about the keys, the documents, the whispers behind my back. I know this marriage is not built on love, but on greed." Her laughter rang out sharp and cruel, bouncing off the walls like shards of glass. "Oh, Mother, you've been reading too many stories. You think I want your trinkets, your dusty old traditions? No, I'm simply taking my place in this house, a place you've held on to for far too long." I turned to my son, searching his face for the boy I had raised. "Can't you see what she's doing? She's driving a wedge between us, turning you against your own mother." But instead of the softness I hoped for, his eyes hardened. His voice, once filled with warmth when he spoke to me, now carried an edge I had never known. "Enough, Mother," he snapped. "You sound jealous. Always accusing her, always doubting her. She's my wife now, and you need to accept that." The words struck like a blade, cutting deeper than any insult his wife could throw. Jealous? After all I had sacrificed, after the nights spent hungry so he could eat, after the years of toil to build a home for him, jealousy was what he saw? My knees weakened, but I refused to crumble before them. Tears stung my eyes, yet I held my head high. If standing up for the truth makes me jealous, then so be it. But mark my words, truth cannot stay buried forever. One day you will see what lies behind her sweet face, and when you do, it may be too late. For a moment, silence fell. My son turned away, his jaw clenched, his hands trembling at his sides. She slipped her arm through his and smirked, victorious in her battle. "Come, darling," she whispered, pulling him toward the door. "You don't need to waste time listening to bitterness." They left me standing there, my chest heavy, my spirit shattered. But though their laughter echoed down the corridor like triumph, I knew something they did not. I was not finished. Not yet. The wound of betrayal had cut deep, but in its place grew a vow, silent, fierce, and unbreakable. If they thought they had won, they were wrong. I would wait, I would watch, and I would gather the strength I needed, not just to survive, but to fight, For a mother's heart may bend, but it does not break. And as the night stretched on, I whispered into the darkness, "The truth will come to light." And when it does, the game will end. The days that followed the confrontation were heavy with silence, yet beneath that silence, a storm brewed in my chest. My son had chosen his wife's words over mine, and the weight of that betrayal pressed against my heart like a stone. But grief slowly gave way to resolve. I realized then that tears alone would not protect what my husband and I had built. Only courage and cunning would. If my daughter-in-law had locked me away with keys, I would now unlock the truth with proof. I began quietly, moving like a shadow in my own house. While she basked in the victory of turning my son against me, she never suspected that I was watching, listening, waiting. Her whispers in the hallways, her hushed phone calls in the dead of night, the hurried way she hid certain papers whenever I entered the room, all of it fed my suspicions. This was not simply a clash of pride between two women. This was a scheme, deliberate and ruthless. One evening, as I passed by the study, I heard her voice low and sharp through the door. "Once everything is under my name, he'll have no choice but to obey me." My heart stopped. She wasn't speaking of love, of building a family together. She was speaking of ownership, of power. I pressed my ear closer. The property papers. The accounts. Soon, his mother will be nothing more than a guest in this house. Her laughter followed, cruel and triumphant. I stepped away quietly, though my hands trembled. Now I knew. But suspicion alone would not save me. I needed proof, undeniable and solid. That night I began searching. I found the cabinet where she kept the keys, not just the ones to the cupboards and drawers, but to my husband's safe, the same one where our family's most important documents were stored. And there, tucked between folders, I discovered something chilling. Photocopies of property deeds, account details and letters of transfer, all prepared, all waiting for signatures she was carefully steering my son into giving. The realization burned through me. She was dismantling my family's legacy, piece by piece, and my son, blinded by love and manipulation, was placing the hammer in her hands. But I was not the helpless woman she thought me to be. Over the next days, I began gathering my own weapons. I dusted off old property papers my husband had safeguarded, documents with clauses she knew nothing about. I spoke quietly to trusted relatives, those who still respected me, and I told them what I had seen. Some shook their heads in disbelief, but when I showed them the photocopies I had found, their eyes widened. Slowly, I built a circle of silent witnesses, people who could stand by me when the time came, and I was patient. I waited until she grew comfortable, until her arrogance blinded her. She began mocking me openly at gatherings, laughing about how the old ways were gone, boasting that she was the one who now made the rules in the household. Each insult she threw my way only confirmed to the others that I was being wronged. I held my tongue because I knew my moment was approaching. Finally, an opportunity arrived. A family dinner, one where both close relatives and neighbors were invited. The daughter-in-law preened like a queen at the head of the table, with my son seated loyally by her side. She made a show of ordering servants, correcting the younger cousins, and dismissing my words with sly remarks that made the guests chuckle uncomfortably. I endured it all silently until she overplayed her hand. With a smile, she raised a glass and declared, "This house is in good hands now. My husband and I will make sure things are run properly from here on." Her words carried the weight of ownership, and I saw several relatives exchange uneasy looks. That was my moment. I rose slowly, every eye turning to me. My hands did not shake, though my heart thundered in my chest. I spoke with calm authority, my voice cutting through the laughter. "You speak of ownership, but do you truly own what you claim?" The room fell silent. My daughter-in-law's smile froze, her eyes narrowing. My son shifted in his seat, confused. Then, from the folds of my shawl, I drew out the documents I had kept hidden. Originals, stamped and sealed, that proved not only my rightful authority over the property, but also revealed the clauses that protected it from transfer without my consent. Gasps filled the room as I laid them out. I did not stop there. I pulled out the photocopies she had hidden, exposing her plan in front of everyone. These, I said firmly, holding them up, are the games she has been playing behind locked doors. She thought she could steal with a smile and a whisper. But a house built on lies will always collapse. Murmurs erupted, shock spreading like wildfire. My son stared, his face drained of color, as the truth finally cracked the blindfold he had worn for too long. My daughter-in-law stammered, tried to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable, and witnesses I had quietly spoken to stepped forward in agreement. And in that moment, the tables turned. The power she had stolen so carefully slipped through her fingers, replaced by shame that burned in every stare fixed upon her. Yet I knew this was only the beginning. Her defeat was near, but her downfall was still to come. The room was heavy with silence after the truth burst into the open. The documents lay on the table like sharp blades, cutting through every excuse my daughter-in-law tried to weave. Her face, once smug with triumph, was pale and trembling. My son, the boy I had raised with love and sacrifice, looked between us as if the ground beneath him had split apart. I saw confusion in his eyes, shame creeping in like an unwelcome shadow. He whispered, "Mother, is this true?" His voice cracked, torn between disbelief and the undeniable weight of the papers before him. I did not shout. I did not gloat. I simply placed a trembling hand on the documents and said, "The truth does not need my defense, son. It stands on its own." The relatives, once uneasy, now spoke boldly. They condemned her deceit, their voices rising one after another, a chorus of judgment that left her cornered. The same guests who had watched her mock me now shook their heads, disgust written plainly across their faces. Respect that she had craved so desperately slipped away like sand through her fingers. My son bowed his head, tears forming in his eyes. He rose from his chair, walked to me slowly, and then, like the child I once cradled, he fell at my feet. "Forgive me, Mother. I let her words blind me. I doubted you when I should have stood by you. I betrayed your love." I lifted him, my heart torn between anger and compassion. "A son may stumble," I whispered, "but a mother's love does not end. What matters now is that you open your eyes and never close them again to the truth." As for her, my daughter-in-law, her defiance crumbled. She tried to plead, claiming she was misunderstood, that she had only been planning for the future. But her lies were brittle, and no one in the room believed them anymore. In that moment, she faced the bitter fruit of her greed. The control she had snatched through manipulation was gone. The keys she once carried, the laughter she once wielded as a weapon, they no longer held any power. She was left exposed, her mask shattered, her dignity stripped away by her own schemes. In the days that followed, the household began to breathe again. My son distanced himself from her control, taking back the role of a man who respected his mother and valued his family's honor. Relatives who had doubted me now looked at me with renewed respect, some even with guilt for staying silent too long. And I, who had once been locked away in my room like a prisoner, now walked freely, carrying not just keys, but the dignity of a woman who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. I did not celebrate her downfall with cruelty. No, my victory was not in her humiliation, but in the restoration of truth, in the knowledge that deceit cannot reign forever. To those who watched and to those who will hear this story, I say this: a house may be built with bricks and mortar, but it stands only when bound by respect and trust. Betrayal may win a night, but justice always claims the dawn. And so, my story closes not with revenge, but with a mother's quiet victory, proof that dignity, once defended, can never truly be stolen.